Hello everyone and welcome to another guide video where I go through how I plan my travel experiences and what I think of them afterwards. If you're watching this, you're probably asking, should I do the Havila Voyage up and down the Norwegian coast? And what exactly is this strange and unique experience? This video aims to share my opinion based on my actual experience so you can make up your own decision. This is a long one, so the video is split into sections. Feel free to jump to points of interest, but hopefully you'll watch it all. So let's get into it. I pride myself on being able to understand any travel experience I intend to undertake with relatively brief, focused research on the internet. It tends to work. My expectations have never crashed into reality yet.
But there is something I'm thinking about. So as you know, this is a channel of internal reflection, quiet moments, solo travel. But even I'm thinking, is this too much quiet reflection and solo travel? You know, I like my Norway cruise, I like my Alaska cruise, I like scenic cruising. But 11 nights, 12 days of it, is this too much of introvert reflection and quiet moments, even for me? I guess we find out. I guess it depends, because to some extent, is this a cruise? Is this a ferry? Or does it even have small snippets of adventure cruising? Guess we'll find out together.
I think in this case it might be easier to start with what a Havila Voyage is not. It's not a traditional ocean cruise. There are no day-long port stays. There isn't any resort-based entertainment like musical acts, theatres or crazy slides. There isn't even a litany of talks or presentations in the theatre. You're essentially on a floating bus route with occasional longer stops. But even those longer stops are less than 4 hours. It's certainly not an adventure cruise. You're not going to be jumping into rib boats launched from the ship to see frontier locations. Neither are there hours and hours of in-depth enrichment talks about the area by historians or naturalists. The various Havila Facebook groups occasionally get people who didn't connect with the voyage, and invariably it's because they were expecting a degree of resort or adventure cruising. As such, they weren't sufficiently externally entertained or distracted by a lot of options and choices. In truth, Havila Voyages is a ferry, but that does the experience a disservice. While the ship is a ferry and is essentially following a defined bus route up and down the coast, if you're staying on for days or doing the whole north-south or back-to-back journey and have a room with dining, it's a very different experience than any other ferry you may have taken. It's less about getting you to a destination, but the voyage itself. Okay, let me try and explain the vibe you're going to get on this ferry cruise. And if I've said this already, I apologise. It is like a floating library with awesome scenery out of every window that also happens to feed you via a set restaurant 3 times a day with set dining in for lunch and evening. That's it. Don't expect anything else. It is as quiet as a library. It is serene as a library. Everyone is, 55 is probably maybe at the younger end, but it works. As you can see, it took me a while to pin it down. I was comparing it to a library or a serene coffee shop for a while in terms of the environment I was experiencing. It wasn't until the return journey that one of the restaurant staff says it's not a cruise, which I did understand, but it was when she said it's a voyage retreat that I got it.
Lunch done, out on the deck as usual, deck 9, top, lovely and sunny. I've just had this whole experience described to me by a waitress in the most accurate way I've heard it. So I kept describing the ship as like a library, and calling it a sort of cruise. Now, the way she said, it's not a cruise, it's a voyage. You could even say it's a retreat. And that is the best way to view it. It is like you're on a retreat that floats through coastal mountainous scenery. That it just nails it.
A voyage retreat nails it perfectly. You're on a voyage up and down the Norwegian coast. The fact that it's also a functional ferry is almost incidental to how you experience it. And it's a retreat in the sense that it's about relative quiet and not seeking grand, raucous commercial entertainment, but being comfortable with activities you might do at a retreat while looking up at the scenery, which is really the main event. One of the most interesting things you can do for your Havila voyage is download the schedule. I mean, it's basically a bus timetable. Now, why would you want to do that? Not only because it gives you all the port sail in and sail out times, which are well worth watching, but you'll learn the voyage actually has a structure. We can use the northward journey as an example. The northern trip is split into 3 segments: the magical fjords of Norway, the northern Norwegian adventure, and the northern tip of Europe. Each of these has unique scenery and different excursions, and it's the basis for the restaurant's menu rotation. As an example, the magical fjords of Norway are all the coastal landscapes that you might associate with Flam, Olden and Grangefjord. You sail into the last one during the summer, and an excursion launches from the ship at the end of the fjord. Then you transition into the northern Norwegian adventure, and this was the one that was the most surprising to me, I have to say, as the scenery shifts to feeling like, I know it sounds weird, you sort of have to experience to see it, it sort of shifts to like Jurassic Park, which is strange considering you're in a northern climate, and you also get the gorgeous Lofoten Islands. I mean, those have to be seen to be believed. If there's anything I came away from on my Havila voyage, it's that a land-based trip, independent, around the Lofoten Islands would definitely be amazing. Then you tip over the top, and if you're going north, you obviously start going eastward towards Russia, and you're in the northern tip of Europe. Each segment did feel unique. Each of the journey segments has a longer port stop, typically 3 to 4 hours. So it was Trondheim, Tromsø and Kirkenes in that order. There is a reason that the trip vlogs are split into longer videos, as they basically map those regional segmentations of the trip. There is a short talk every day about what you can expect to see and, let's face it, basically the excursions on offer, and occasionally pop-up events like Havila food stories, but they are very fleeting. There isn't a packed itinerary of on-ship entertainment and talks throughout the day. The truth is, you'll spend the vast majority of your time on this voyage looking at scenery or entertaining yourself. So what did my Havila voyage look like as an example? Well, there is some structure around the day, or at least it was my structure. You have 3 set times to eat. Breakfast is available in the morning, and then you have your specific set time for lunch and dinner. They are essentially the stakes in the ground around which you navigate other things. I then spend my time doing 2 things: reading and fully engaging with the scenery, with a focus on seeing more of the sail-ins and sail-outs of ports, hence the bus route timetable. This meant there was a lot of scenery, but I never got bored with it. Hell, even when reading, I'd be doing it beside one of the floor-to-ceiling windows and occasionally feel the need to interrupt my book and get up on deck because the landscape had changed. You'd see people doing different things, like talking in small groups, which I did a lot myself, playing cards, or one person even had an instrument they'd brought on board and they had headphones so they could hear themselves playing it. They would literally be on deck playing away while the scenery rolled on by. There was hardcore sauna guy who'd occasionally pop out of the sauna in his towel to see the scenery. I mean, he did that in some pretty cold weather. And to be honest, it took us the whole of the northern trip to realise he was coming out of the sauna rather than just have a fetish for walking the deck in a towel. There was also, which I can include me in this group, right? Hardcore photo guy and hardcore video guy. I guess I was hardcore video guy. You know, two people up at like 1 or 2 in the morning still filming stuff. I mean, you have to, right? In the northern journey, one of the key aspects is visiting Trollfjord and this beautiful inlet, like between 11 and 2 a.m. in the morning, and it was fantastic. Personally, I spent it looking at scenery, observing the sail in and sail out of ports, reading and talking to people, and of course eating. That was pretty much it. So there is excursions. Excursions are an interesting facet of a Havila voyage because they are similar in principle to traditional cruise excursions. You won't go far wrong if you imagine them as such, but the experience differs due to the shorter port stops. An obvious question is, if the majority of the port stops are 10 to 20 minutes, how can you really have excursions in any port other than those small number of hubs? First, they will focus somewhat on those extended port stay hubs, and those excursions are short enough to get you back to the ship in that 3 to 4 hours. But remember, a Havila voyage is on a bus timetable. So at least via the excursions, I'm not going to be able to tell you whether you can do that independently. I have a sneaky feeling you probably could, but certainly via the excursions, you can get off at one port and get on at another. Several excursions use this to deliver longer experiences because they've disconnected it from a single port stop. For example, the main excursion out of Geirangafjord is like this. You get off the ship in Geirangafjord and you get on 2 stops further down, allowing you to have an 8-hour excursion. I guess the question is, are they worth it? Well, they are quite expensive. I would suggest doing 2 or 3 that you are really focused on, and then just hold off and see what you feel like as the voyage unfolds. You may find yourself perfectly entertained just by relaxing on the ship, or you may want to stock up the excursions a bit more. I don't think they really fill out other than a few priority ones, so you can be flexible, and they keep you up to date on how the sale of those is going, you know, in a nice informative way, not a hard sell way. I did the one at Geirangafjord because it allowed me to see things in that area that I'd not managed to see in 2 of the cruises to that region. And then I also did the North Cape one because, hell, you're going to the North Cape, right? So you want to actually be at the North Cape. So I thought those were 2 wise ones to do. But there are also ones more focused, not so much on scenery, but history and culture and animals. Just don't expect anything in history, culture or nature to rival sort of a expedition cruise, because it's not that. But there are cruises, there are excursions with those options that aren't just scenery. Personally, and if people have slightly different opinions than this who've done it, please post in the comments. Despite the excursions, the experience remains focused on the scenery from the ship, but you could certainly pack it out a bit more if you did a few more excursions. One thing I've learned, if we place Havila Voyages in a cruise bucket so we can do a bit of contrast, is that your fellow cruise passengers are highly dictated by the type of ship you are on. So for example, a warm 2 to 3 day cruise attracts a particular crowd. A longer 7+ day cruise gets a different crowd. Importantly, I've noticed long scenic cruises get a different crowd than similar length cruises in the sun. Havila Voyages is like a longer scenic cruise to the max. And this does impact the type of people who have put down their hard-earned cash. People on these cruises are more introverted and reflective, less gregarious in terms of being brash and loud, and are prone to having random, quite deep conversations between individuals and in small groups. I have found on long scenic cruises, of which an Havila Voyage, though not a cruise, is certainly of that type, the level and depth of conversation you have with people about their lives and how they want to progress is immense. and it was no exception on this cruise, right? It certainly proved true on this Havila voyage, with many an enthralling discussion about life, lives, personal experiences, with ever more, with ever more depth. And I definitely learnt that you do not undertake knee surgery lightly. That is one thing I learnt from my Havila cruise. And this is very similar, as I said, to my more traditional cruises to Iceland, Norway and Alaska, right? They attract that sort of personality. I would say the crowd trends older, though I have to keep reminding myself. I myself am 54, but I often found myself talking to people who are probably at least 10 years older than me, probably maybe 20. And that's fine. I find that perfectly fine. People often tell me I come across as older, and when I was a bit younger, that they would obviously explain, oh, I don't mean how you physically look, just in terms of your attitude. I mean, I don't care either way. I get what they meant, right? The average person who watches this YouTube channel is my age or older, so that trend continues. In short, if you're looking for a bunch of introspective folks willing to engage in enthralling conversations, one-to-one or in small groups, you're going to love it. As mentioned, one of the stakes in the ground around your day is the meals, which brings us to the food. How would I talk about the food? I would say it's very good, it's very varied, it's entertaining, it's worth doing, taking the odd surprising option that you may not always do. But is it super high-end dining? Probably not, but it is absolutely fascinating and a core part of the trip. The first thing to note is that there is no buffet. So I'm going to give you how it worked for me, and then take into account that they do vary this up a bit as time goes on. So always check in how it's working for you, but it should be broadly similar, right? You have breakfast, lunch and dinner. Breakfast is 0700 to 10, lunch is 11:30 to 14:30, and dinner is 1800 to 2100. Breakfast is open seating, so just be mindful of the times. But for lunch and dinner, you pick a paired set of time slots, and that's when you eat every day. Now you select these time slots when you check in, and you can also choose whether you want to default group seating or private table. I got a private table because I was solo. They do run out though, so just be mindful of that. And this may also be slightly different if you have a suite. I wasn't at those elevated levels, so I can't say how it works, but I have a feeling suite people may be able to book earlier than actual check-in at the time of boarding. So worth checking that out. The experience and the format differs across breakfast, lunch and dinner. It's easier to start with lunch and then compare how the others contrast to that. I would say the efficient execution of the experience, which I found very friendly and very efficient, does depend on people sticking to their time slot. I missed my time slot once as I was happy talking to people and I lost track of time, and they did fit me in, wasn't a problem, but it took a bit longer than usual, and that's because I was out of my time slot, so I ended up sitting in a totally different place on a different side of the restaurant. So I think if people did just en masse eat when they wanted, it would cause a bit of chaos. So they can, if it happens, right? But try and stick to the times. So for lunch, you pick from a menu of small dishes. They advise 3, not including dessert, being the recommended amount. The best thing to do is order 3, and if you're still hungry, just keep on ordering more. I always had at least 3. I never found that I needed to eat less than 3. But some days I had 4. I think one day I had 5. I mean, I recommend just order 3. And then when they come back to ask if you want dessert, go, no, I want this and this again, or I want to try this one. And they'll just keep bringing it, right? It's great because you can branch out, right? In lunch, I would branch out to fish dishes that I wouldn't normally try. And I thought, well, it doesn't really matter, right? It's a smallish portion. It's not the end of the world if I don't like it, and I just replace it with another one. So, but I ate all those fish dishes. They were gorgeous. But if it wasn't that model, I may not have tried it. Dinner is a more traditional affair with a starter, a main, and a dessert. Breakfast has continental items on a buffet, so I guess they do have a buffet, but only as part of breakfast. And then hot items are brought to in a similar method to lunch. Again, the hot items on breakfast are small, actually even smaller than the lunch items, so just keep adding as required. Each experience has a sort of casual elegance. It feels ordered. It's like a table service experience, but also very casual and friendly. I really liked it. The lunch and dinner menus change 3 times northward and 3 times southward in line with the recognised phases of the voyage, which map to the regions of the Norwegian coast so they can deliver local variants. Despite this, there are always some always-on dishes, and I noticed there is always the odd dish at the bottom of the menu that is like the last line of resort. So if you literally look at a phases menu and go, oh my god, there's always the last line of defence pasta dish at the bottom. Luckily, I never had to resort to it. There is sometimes a lot of fish dishes on the menu, sometimes in some regions more than others, but I never found a problem, right? I entertained more fish dishes than I normally would, and I thought they were great. Overall, eating became a core part of the experience and the structure of the day. It never got to the point where I grew tired of having my day anchored in this way. I never got bored with the experience, and I enjoyed all the food. I think my favourite was lunch. And the way you could choose from small dishes and mix them up and just keep experimenting, I really liked that. But then I would, because I like the sort of food truck experience that cruise lines are experimenting with, where you have, you know, a number of concessions which do small set menus, and they can just deliver that repeatedly with quality, and the variation comes from visiting the multiple concessions. I would say the lunch experience is basically that food truck concession sort of model, but it's just hidden behind the scenes and they deliver it to you as a table service experience. And I really like that. Okay, let's talk about the ship. Havila Voyages ships are ferries. But, you know, you might say to me, I've been on a ferry, Ian, and my experience of a ferry isn't that great. And I certainly wouldn't call it a retreat. Well, I mean, you're right. A ferry is often not, well, it's either functional or not a very pleasant environment, right? Definitely functional. The great thing about Havila Voyages is that all their ships are 4 years old or less, and therefore they've been designed so that they work as ferries and fulfill the function. But for those doing the longer voyages in rooms and with food, they definitely work on an elevated level. I mean, it's not super high-end elevated, but it definitely feels serene, relaxed, retreat-like. In all honesty, some videos are going to give you a more detailed breakdown of the ship, much better than this one. This video and my vlogs are less about a deck-by-deck tour of the boat. You can certainly find those on the internet, and are more about conveying the experience of being on the voyage as it unfolds and the feeling of it. But I can share my experience of the vessel. I enjoyed my time on Havila Pollux. It was amazing. It was very relaxing, and it never felt crowded or hectic, right? So, yeah. I mean, when you think about it, the amount of space, I don't know, it felt like I had a lot of space and I never felt I was crowded in. I was lucky with the weather, so I did spend quite a bit of time outside looking at the scenery. I've learnt from my more traditional scenic cruises through Norway, Iceland and Alaska that I like seeing things in that more expansive, all around me feel that you get from being on deck. You can tell from the vlogs, as pretty much all of my footage is filmed outside. I found the ship very well organised and soon got into the rhythm of the experience around the meal times and the port calls. I do think a small selection of people thought it was less well organised, but I felt half of them fell into me having no real idea of what they were complaining about. You know, it was a bit, yeah, whatever. And the other half weren't actually leaning into what the experience offered and were wishing it was something else. I mean, I never really understand that. You have to criticise something based on what is actually being offered, not do this horror film wasn't funny sort of criticism. And it's like, well, yeah, that's right, because you didn't go and see a comedy. You know, there was a bit of that going on. When inside, I'd be sitting next to the floor-to-ceiling windows so I could read while keeping an eye on the scenery. So I could go, wow, this looks great. I want to go up on deck. Or I'd be sitting in the observation lounge, which that may not be its name, but it's what I call it, so that I could do the same. I mean, they offered relaxing, serene environments to do these retreat-like activities. I think there were 2 occasions where you had people talking on the phone, you know, hi, I'm on a mobile phone. That might be an old sketch show. You may not know what that is. But these people were viewed with, like, you know, they were like a contagion, an antibody on the ship, which people sort of stared at till they stopped. I had an inside cabin towards the back on the lowest guest deck. I found the room fine and never had any problems sleeping. But if you've seen the vlogs, and I go into it in a bit more detail on there, it did have a significant hum on the first day, and that continued at way lower levels throughout the trip. Ultimately, it never bothered me. I could sleep, and beyond the first day, I just filtered it out, even when reading in my room, if I wanted just to get away slightly for an hour or 2. But some people, a few rooms further to the back, did get moved, I think. There are different stories around these deck 4 rooms to the aft, so take that to mean some people may have challenges with them, depending on how sensitive you are to noise. I was fine on noise and space, but I also realise I don't demand much in this regard. The ship is also small, which is great. You know, you feel like you're actually on a ship than just a massive hotel. But it does mean it don't take much to move it. You spend the majority of your time between land masses, so you get away with a lot and it's quite calm. But on the moments where you branch out a bit more into the coast being further away, I mean, you can feel the motion. And we also had a named storm the day before we got back into Bergen. Boy, I mean, I found it fantastic. You were still allowed on deck, which I found crazy. If this was a more traditional cruise ship, they would have closed that deck off. But not Havila Voyages, I tell you. Named storm, ship bobbing up and down, totally allowed on deck. And I joked with a guy in the observation lounge, a German guy who I met a few times on trips into port, you know, independent ones.
This is the closest I'll get to one of those NASA flights where you feel weightless for 5 seconds.
Now, me being someone who's, you know, gone offshore for short periods and things like that to deliver software and things, I found it fine. But put it this way, the lifts were shut and there was a lot less people around, so people had retreated to their rooms. So yeah, it is a small ship, so just keep that in mind. Vast majority of the time it's fine. You're moving through inlets, there's land on either side. But for the short bits where you go out to the coast or you get hit with a storm, just remember, it don't take much to move it. Also, one last point. From the outside, the ship looks amazing. I have to say, they have nailed the branding. So, should you do it? Well, these questions are challenging because I'm the last person who wants to feel like I've talked anyone out of doing something. So, I'm going to describe who I think it's perfect for, and I'm going to leave it up to you to reflect on what that means. I would say Havila Voyages is basically introvert crack. What do I mean by that? I don't mean you have to be an introvert, but you have to be someone who can entertain themselves in solitude or talking to individuals or small groups and just be quite reflective. If anyone was going to sit down and design a perfect travel experience for introverts or reflective individuals, there's a chance they'd invent Havila Voyages. If you do the back-to-back, you're on a ship for 12 days. And a few minor diversions aside, you're literally entertaining yourself reading, watching the scenery, maybe playing cards or a board game, possibly playing an instrument if you bring one along, or talking in respectful tones with your fellow passengers. It's a retreat, not a cruise that's trying to entertain you every moment of every day. You're left to your own devices or thoughts for long periods of time, which for me is fantastic. Can you try to jig that experience? Of course you can. You can pack the voyage with excursions to try and fill more of the time. I'm not entirely sure how that works, or if it works that well, as I didn't seek to do it. I think that might break things up a bit more, but not totally distract you from the fact you're on a voyage that feels like a retreat. I'm not saying you have to be an introvert or highly reflective person to enjoy it, but I do believe you have to be going for the scenery and the opportunity it gives you to find some inner peace and tranquility. So you're free to find what you need from the voyage internally within yourself. If you tire of inner peace and tranquility quickly and seek external distractions beyond just scenery, you're going to hate it. So that's it. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments. If you want to tell me about your Havila voyage and whether you would contrast it with mine, feel free to do so in the comments. I'm always fascinated by people who've done similar experiences to me. Beyond that, till next time, and while you've set off on your journey towards inner peace and tranquility, you can check out my journey of discovery on the actual Havila Voyages trip next.